Okay, we can start with the second part of our session in the morning of the one-day conference entitled Biblical Wisdom and the Ethics of Eating. So we have the second speakers. Thank you for joining us. Professor Manca Erzetič.
Perfetto.
Oh, wow.
Como eslovena. Como una verdadera eslovena.
At night, I have to repeat on myself.
Manca.
Yeah.
No manca.
Manca. My dreams are about this pronunciation. She has recently joined the International Center of Studies on Contemporary Nihilism as a research fellow. Professor Erzetič holds a PhD from the University of Ljubljana with a dissertation entitled Witnessing in Philosophy and Literature within the Historical Situation of the 20th Century. She works as a researcher at the Istituto Nova Regia for the Humanities and currently teaches philosophy at the Faculty of Slovenian and International Studies at the New University, Slovenia. She's also the author of several academic and critical articles in the fields of phenomenology, hermeneutics, and cultural studies. She has received several international awards for her scientific research and essayistic work. In recent years for hermeneutic Trinity in Sodobonsdorf, Journal for Literature and Culture, and an award from the University in Ljubljana for her work Concentration Camps as a Zone of Evil, the Hermeneutics of a Testifier and the Literary Testifying. She participated in several international conferences. Thank you for joining us, and I leave you the floor. And also for you, we have 50 minutes. We have time for the question at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Myriam. No?
Yeah.
Myriam? Yeah, thank you. And good morning. So, my presentation today, as you see, the title is Testimoniality of Bread and Wine. This is a very wide topic, but I will try to, let's say, present only a few aspects about this. So, given to the theme of the symposium, my contribution would probably require some preliminary explanations regarding the relationship to the food that developed under the influence of the Christian religious tradition. This would cover how the tradition itself accepted, adapted, and shaped this relationship, as well as how it reshaped itself accordingly. These aspects have already been discussed in detail and can be used as a basis. In this context, it is important not only to emphasize the significant role that nourishment shaped by the Christian faith tradition plays in our day lives, but also the symbolic meaning of food in this tradition in terms of both the established religious practices and the testimony of faith. In this respect, I particularly, when we consider the broad perspective of mass food production and its influence on the contemporary food habits, the ethics of food eating come to the fore, as Adriano Fabris, whom I would like very much to thanks for invitation, demonstrates in his recent book Etica del mangiare, cibo e relazione, which was translated also in Slovenian language and last year also in the English. So, ethics of eating and drinking, food and relations. In the chapter, food between the sacred and the secular, which he first presented at the conference A Tavola con Dio e con gli uomini, organized as a part of Milan Expo in 2015, Adriano Fabris emphasized. I will take it, it's interesting that he actually took the same part at the beginning as I will now present it, so this is very important. No? Food is truly a bridge connecting religious and secular approaches to life. It is one of the ways in which reference to a dimension accepted as sacred actually influence human behavior. However, in the ways in which we experience food today, there is also a real contrast between religious sensitivity and secular practice. Or rather, in our secularized societies, alienation and indifference to the value of food, its forms of consumption, and its very meaning have prevailed. If food has become merely a consumer product, if it is abundant in the Western world and can be stored without spoiling, it is clear that many of the practical needs that were the basis for the dietary rules of various religions have disappeared. In the consumer society, for example, the choice of fasting can have a primarily polemical meaning precisely because of what is available in excess. So my lecture does not address the problem ethics of eating in the age of mass food production and consumption, which, let us not forget, is also marked by the widespread hunger, nor does it address the role and influence of Christian religious tradition on our eating habits. Instead, it focuses on the topic that plays a central role in the Christian liturgy and presents a fundamental component of the Christian faith. And more than anything else, it is intrinsic to the very humanity of human beings. This is the symbolism of bread and wine, whereby the term symbolism must be placed in brackets, as it is not symbolism as we usually understand it, but rather a symbol in the primary Greek sense of symbolo. I hope that it's pronounced properly, but if not, you will understand anyhow. So I throw together, dash together, compare, correspond, tally, come to the conclusion from syn, with, together, and bolo, I throw, put. Paul Ricoeur defined symbolism as food for the soul in one of his writings. So this was the symbol Food for Thought from 1960. The symbol provides food for thought. This maxim that I found so intriguing said two things. The symbol provides, it is not myself, but the symbol which puts in meaning. And what it provides, food for its thought, something to think about. The statement therefore suggests that while enigmatically everything has already been said, nonetheless, in the dimension of thought, you always have to keep starting over and over. It is this articulation between thought and symbol that I want to ferret out and understand. So the symbolic testimony of bread and wine represents essentially the divine gift of bread and wine as a mysterium of Christian faith and also humanity in general. This is why it seems appropriate to introduce our discussion with George Strachel's poem, A Winter's Evening, from the December 1930, which in its purest form conveys the symbolism and mystery of bread and wine. So I will not, I think that because we are on the limit time, I will not read it, the whole chapters when I will be presenting here at the PowerPoint, but maybe I will just skip to the third line. So this is what is in bold. Wanderer quietly steps within. Pain has turned the treasure hoards to stone. There lie in limpid brightness shone upon the table bread and wine. So this is actually in his book, One to the Way to Language. Heidegger places Strachel's poem at the forefront in the first discussion entitled Language, where the treasure, petrified by pain, is interpreted in terms of ontological difference. Bread and wine are contextualized within the elucidation of the forethought or of the mortal and the divine, earth and heaven. Where does the pure brightness shine? On the threshold, in the settlings of the pane. The rift of the difference makes the limpid brightness shine. It's luminous, joining the sides, the brightening of the word into its own. The rift of the difference expropriates the word into its worldling, which grants things. By the brightening of the word in their golden gleam, bread and wine at the same time attain to their own gleaming. The nobly named things are lustrous in its simplicity of their thinking. Bread and wine are the fruits of heaven and earth, gifts from the divinities to mortals. Bread and wine gather these four to themselves from the simple unity of their fourfoldness. The things that are called bread and wine are simply things because their bearing of word is fulfilled without intermediary by the favor of the word. Such things have their sufficiency in letting the word fourfold stay with them, the pure limpid brightness of the word and simple gleaming of things go through their between the deep difference. Heidegger does not explicitly dwell on what Tracker also quite clearly points out, namely that the consecration of bread and wine in Christian religion traditions constitutes a key testimony linked to the celebration of the greatest Christian holiday, Easter, as a remembrance of Christ's death and resurrection from the dead. The Synoptic Gospels from Matthew, Luke, and Mark state that Jesus broke bread and supper and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup of wine and offered it to them. "Drink it from it, all of you. This is my blood, the blood of covenant, which is poured out of many for the forgiveness of sins." He also commanded them, "Do this in my memory of me." Christians consider this event to be the institution of the sacrament of the Eucharist. Jesus also predicted that one of the apostles, Judas Iscariot, would betray him. After supper, Jesus went with some of his disciples to the Mount of Olives. Judas Iscariot led the Jewish high priest and soldiers there who arrested Jesus. The event is described quite briefly in the first three Gospels, the so-called Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, while the Gospel of John devotes special attention to it. So, the Last Supper have a profound influence on early Christianity. In the first centuries, Christians developed the worship based on the reenactment of the Last Supper. Such ceremonies in early Christianity were called agape, love feast. During the gathering, the participants would actually have dinner together, and then the leader of the ceremony, priest, would repeat Jesus' words of consecration over the bread and wine, which were then distributed among the participants. Over the following centuries, the ceremony developed into the Mass, which is still based on the Eucharistic offering of bread and wine. Eucharist is Greek word and means thanksgiving. This is what Catholic Christians call the remembrance of the Last Supper. Those attending communion slowly walk to the front of the church, in the front of the... I hope that I did not skip any. No. I had in mind that it should be one slide before, but maybe slides away. Those attending communion, like I said, slowly walk to the front of the church, and in front of the altar they receive the host from the priest or his assistant. This is a wafer. For Catholics, the host is something very special, namely the body of Christ himself, which they receive within themselves, endure with the wafer. This is why Catholics treat leftover wafers with great care. They do not simply throw them away, but lock them in the special cabinet called tabernacle. Most Catholic children attend their first Eucharistic between the ages of 8 and 10. You will see why I'm this talking, because it will refer to the last part when we are going to the concentration zone. And the whole meaning and the connection with the children and so on. This event is called the First Communion. Offered, the whole family celebrates with them. The Lord's Supper is one of the sacraments for Protestant and Catholic believers. They believe that God reveals himself in a special way through a sacrament. Protestant Christians celebrate Holy Communion with bread or wafer and wine or grape juice. Often, those taking part in Holy Communion stand in a semicircle around the altar. There is a pastor, distributes the bread of wafers and passes around the calic with the wine or juice. Those who wish to do so can take a sip directly from the calic. Those who prefer not to do so, they dip their bread briefly into the wine or juice. So with regard to the testimonies in the fourth gospel, in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, we cannot discuss in detail here. It should be emphasized that we encounter the phenomenon of testimony in the gospels on 4 levels. So first is the testimony about the Christ as conveyed by the evangelist. The second one is the Christ himself as the witness of God's word. The third is God, the Father, of the witness of Christ's truth. And the fourth is the Christian believers as the witnesses of God's word. In this context, I must mention another aspect of testimony, which perhaps encompasses all 4 of the previous ones, and it's contained in the events described and in the words and things that are imbued with symbolic and mysterious meaning. In a distinguished sense, these are bread and wine. So they are not just ordinarily food on the table, but testify to something else, something transcendent. So to testify to something else, to speak something else or different, is meaning of the Greek word allegory. On this basis, an allegorical and grammatical interpretation, so we are coming from symbolical to allegorical, in accordance with this doctrine of the fourfold sense of the Holy Scriptures, we could supplement the literal and the allegorical sense with the anagogical and tropogogic sense. However, the appropriation of sense is only possible and makes sense on the basis of faith. Faith itself, on the other hand, requires testimony, and it is more a matter of testimony than of a will and reason. A will and reason can lead us to the absolute foundation of faith, but only testimony can confront us with what is absolved in and as faith. So, like this absolved, a true believer is, in a sense, an absolvent who not only expresses his faith, but also internalizes it, nourishing himself with it, so to speak. According to the evangelist, the consecration of bread and wine fulfills the testament of Christ the Savior. Testament means a will, and furthermore a convent. Thus, the terms of Old and New Testament become established. So, from Latin word testamentum means a last will, publication of the will. From testari, make a will, be witness to. From testis, witness, generally accepted to be formed to be from tristi, so the third person standing by, from the rooted tris, three, on the notion of third person. According to Gospel, this third person is revealed in the Holy Spirit. The key connection between the Testament and testimony is so established in the doctrine of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. First formulated among the early Christians in the mid-2nd century and later, and fathers of the Church as they attempt to understand the relationship between Jesus and God in their scriptural documents and prior traditions. The symbolic bond itself creates, I apologize, but I'm not very good with, as you see with this PPT, PowerPoint, I'm not using it very often. So I try to put some okay, let's stay here, I know where I am with the PowerPoints. So an excellent attestation of this is actually provided by Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, painted between 1494 and the beginning of the 1498. So the refectory of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milano. In the Last Supper painting, you see a rigorous geometric construction which enabled Da Vinci to provide the 12 apostles into groups of 3 settings. So his right arm holds the 30 coins he received on the table, and his left to the bread piece Jesus offers. Christ is the central figure of the composition, who is in a perfectly triangular space. It is an expression of the divine Trinity, which absorbs itself in the institution of Eucharist. Further, Christ offers wine and bread, indicating the sacrifice he is preparing. There is immobility in him, represents the prime mover from which all actions spring and return, telling life as a complex movement of gestures. The left arm of Christ depicts on an extraordinary feature by representing 2 posters simultaneously. At first outreached as if to take the bread, and the other is as the withdraw. He represents the bread as his body, the offering for sacrifice, and the wine as his blood. Orientating the hands in opposition to each other indicates earth and heaven, between which the Son of God places himself to salvage man. Da Vinci's Last Supper illustrates Judas Iscariot having knocked over the salt cellar. European superstition hold that spilling salt is an evil omen, and at times salt was a valuable commodity and as such a symbol of trust and friendship. Spilling of salt was also associated with figure loss. Another explanation claims that the salt makes the land barren for a very long time, so spilling of salt also meant a form of cursing a land. The spilled salt by Judas has been portrayed as the profess of his betrayal, or as an emblem of his misfortune in being the one chosen to betray. The symbolism and mysterium of bread and wine have specially spiritual and artistic relevance for the testimony of the Christian's faith and its practice. The first known depiction is from the 6th century mosaic from Ravenna, where we can see Christ and the 12 apostles reclining around a long table on which there are two very large fish on the plate surrounded by loaves of bread. This might have been the actual seating arrangement of the Last Supper, but the austerity of the food seems more figurative than true, fish being the symbol of Christ. Da Vinci and many other paintings, the Last Supper in the history of art, have also influenced the contemporary art in the 21st century. So we could especially mention here Dalí and Warhol. So I will not go to very detail in this Dalí explanation, but he, at this picture, actually wanted to pay attention to the number 12. So 12 hours of day, 12 months of the year, 12 signs of the zodiac around the sun, and 12 apostles around the Christian. So the sacrament of the Last Supper is not an attempt to recreate the meal, but a symbolic presentation of the Eucharistic ritual. Rather than specific apostle, the men at the table are idealized participants. So just as the surrounding cupola appears only partially real, and Christ is not corporally present because his body is partially transparent. So to more tangible allusion to Jesus' physical presence is the symbolic bread and wine. And we have another of Andy Warhol, 16 Last Supper, from the 1986. It's actually one of the also outstanding examples from the artist's great final painting series. So executed near the end of his life, the monumental piece, the largest painting by the American pop artist ever to come to auction, takes up the theme of religion and laws that were so key to his work. So let's go to the another point of modern, let's say, pop culture. And most modern viewers of the Last Supper will know Mary Magdalene from her role in Dan Brown's 2003 novel, The Da Vinci's Code, which not only claims the figure in the painting to be her, but also goes on to suggest that she and Jesus have a sexual relationship. But Mary was already a central and controversial figure in the Christian church when Leonardo toiled in the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria della Grazia. Immediately to Jesus' right is a swooning, long-haired, androgynous figure whose downcast eyes and expression of ineffable sadness mirror that of Jesus himself. For many scholars, the persons Leonardo set at the Jesus' right hand was not John or indeed any other man, but rather Mary Magdalene. We cannot devote much attention here to the testimony and speculation regarding Mary Magdalene. However, there is another, perhaps even more profound conspiracy connected with the Apostle John, which forms the focus of Johann Herich's interest in his book Brot und Wein, Die Poesie der Abendmahls. So, no, this is not it. We will stay here. When John deliberately, Herich, I quote Herich here, when John deliberately exiled Jesus from the imagery and promise of the Passover feast to such an extent that he rejected even the more reliable chronology of the Synoptic Gospels and predates the words of institution of Lord's Supper in the circle of disciples to the feeding of the multitude. This has an exciting background that has been repeatedly downplayed by the exegetes to to this day that only Hegel, Hölderlin, and Schilling have decisively uncovered. John is clearly attempting to remove Jesus from Jewish context in order to sacrament the Greek mysterious tradition. John was the most likely initiated into Greek mysterious cults. He who mastered the art of allusion like no other New Testament author repeatedly endeavors to bring Christ and Dionysus closer together, even to fraternize them. John characterizes Christ as the true wine in 1.5, and thus allow him to surpass Dionysus in significance. The Johannine description already refers to Dionysus, as John also characterized Christ and the true Heracles. When he lets him die with Heracles, words on his lips, again in contrast to the synoptic, "It is finished." John 19.30. So here is the end of the quote. In terms of poetic testimony to bread and wine, Hölderlin elegy Bread and Wine certainly occupies a central place. In the first draft and in the first fair copy, the elegy was still titled Der Weingott, so the Wine God. But in the revision, the new title was Brod und Wein, Bread and Wine, appears, which is connected to a new emphasis. Initially, the poem was entirely focused on Dionysus, but later it was rewritten in the key places to create an ambiguity that refers to both Dionysus and Christ. However, Hölderlin never had that poem printed. Only the first stanza was published without authorization, under the title Die Nacht, the night. The poem centers of the figure of Dionysus, the god of wine, and the Greek mythology. The original title was the god of wine. Dionysus is also the god of the night, of Dionysian enthusiasm, of inspired madness, the god of poets, and the god of joy. He appears for his first time in the third stanza as the coming god. So I will not explain now the stanzas, but we have here in the second triad of stanza the view broadness to include also all Greek gods and antiquity who are referred to the heavenly and blessed gods. And at the end of the sixth stanza, Christ is alluded for the first time, later also in verses 129 and 130, and the final stanza. The figure of Dionysus merges with the death of Christ. This is all-encompassing God leaves humans to gifts of bread and wine as a comforting sign of his presence. So this is this one, bread and wine, 8th stanza. Some time ago, to us it seems like a long time. All those who made our lives happy climbed upwards. The Father turned his face away from people, and sorrow came right upon the earth. Finally, a quiet genius appeared, comforting in a godlike way, who announced the end of the day and disappeared. The chore of gods left some gift behind as a sign of their presence and eventual return, which we may appreciate it in our human fashion as we used to. That which is superior had grown too great for pleasure with spirit among men. And to this day, no one strong enough for the highest joys, although some gratitude survives quietly. Bread is the fruit of the earth, yet it's blessed also by light. The pleasure of wine comes from the thundering God. We remember that gods thereby those who were once with us and who will return when the time is right. Thus poets sing of the wine god in earnest, and their ringing praises of old one aren't devised in vain. We have also a Heidegger commentary and what are poets for in a destitute time? Ask Hölderlin's elegy, Bread and Wine. We hardly understand the question today. How, then, shall we grasp the answer that Hölderlin gives? And what are poets for in a destitute time? The word time here means the era to which we ourselves still belong. For Hölderlin's historical experience, the appearance and the sacrificial death of Christ mark of the beginning of the end of the day of the gods. Night is falling. Ever since the united there, Heracles, Dionysus, and Christ have left the world. The evening of the world's age has been declining towards its night. The world night is spreading its darkness. The era is defined by the God failure to arrive, by the default of God. But the default of God, which Hölderlin experienced, does not deny that the Christian relationship with God lives on in individual and in the church, in the churches. Still less does it assess their relationship negatively. The default of God means that no God any longer gathers men and things unto him and visibly and unequivocally, and by such gathering disposes the world history and man's sojourn in it. The default of God forebodes something even grimmer, however. Not only have the gods and the God fleet, but the divine radiance have become extinguished in the world history, the time of the world's night in the destitute time, because it becomes even more destitute. So this is from Vasu Dichter, from What Are Poets For, from Martin Heidegger, in Poetry, Language, Thoughts. So Heidegger delivered the lecture in the commemoration of 20th century anniversary of Rainer Maria Rilke's death in 1946. So this was a very important year because it was a year after the end of the Second World War. So as a conclusion, I would like to discuss the reverse symbolic and testimony of bread and wine in the testimonial literary work of Slovenian writer from Trieste, Boris Pahor, who was born in 1913 and died 2022. Necropola, from his literary work, was this Necropola, Necropolis, which has been translated into more than 18 languages and was also declared the Italian Book of the Year in 2008. So Pahor, considered by many, not only in Slovenia, but also more broadly in Europe, to be one of the key witnesses of the 20th century, recounts in it the atrocities he experienced of or witnessed in German concentration camps in Natzweiler-Strufthof, Markisch, Dachau, Miltau-Baudora, Harzungen, and Bergen-Belsen, but the most of his time he spent in Dachau. So between February 1944 and April 1945. The news of his death in 2022 at the age of 108 was accompanied by the dedication that the oldest witness of the Holocaust had died. Boris Pahor had a terrible experience of both fascists and Nazis, as well as the communist totalitarian violence. As a child, he witnessed the burning of the Slovenian National Home in Trieste by Italian fascists in 1920. Thanks to his 1975 interview with Edvard Kozbek, one of the greatest contemporary Slovenian poets and writers and one of the leaders of the Slovenian resistance movement during the World War II, the truth about the post-war communist massacres came to the light, which significantly destabilized the communist regime in Slovenia and at the time and paved the way the democratic changes in the 80s. So Pahor was banned from entire Yugoslavia from entering into Yugoslavia from the moment of this publication with Kozbek. In addition to prestigious literary and national award, he became an honorary citizen of the Europe in 2013, and in 2020, Italy and Slovenia awarded him together with the highest national honors. So I have this privilege that I was very much connected with him, and this was in Ljubljana, Tivoli Square, with now Tatjana Rojc, who is a Slovenian senator in Italian Senate in Rome, from Rome, but she is my colleague and was taking care of also for Pahor. I have privilege that I could discuss what means to be witness, what means testimony, not only like interview, but most through conversation. And he actually pointed out some very, very complicated statements which could not be understood if he would tell them to the journalists or the national television, because one of his statements was that we were taking him in the spa. I went to him when he was in the spa, and we had 6 or 7 hour conversation in the lobby, and he said to me, I particularly remember that the life during the the concentration zone, there is no difference between life in a concentration zone and the life outside of it. Mm-hmm. This is the statement that he always, and this Tatjana also said, this is also the statement that he said to you, because we were having this relationship which is important for testimoniality. And anyhow, I will get now the first to conclude my presentation, and then maybe we can open also some of the other questions. So here I will focus on a certain aspects of what I call the reverse symbolism and testimony, as I said, of bread and wine in his book Necropolis. While strictly rationed pieces of bread determined the merely possibility of survival in the concentration camp, one could not expect Pahor's narrative to also include memories of wine as well. This is from Necropolis. I have returned to the steps, I have, before explaining this is a quote from Necropolis, but after 4 or 5 years, he actually returned to Dachau at the same place where he was actually imprisoned before. So I have returned to the steps and slowly make my way to the uppermost terrace. These narrower terraces remind me now on the ones around Trieste, which rise steeply from the seacoast to the edge of the karst plateau. There they confirm the contour of the hills. They hide beneath the acacia, the tree acacias, and dense brambles. On either side are vineyards whose old wines challenge the sun and slowly force it to mellow the copper 128 earth juices in deep blue branches of grapes. Back then, never thought of those magnificent steps that linked blue sea and azure sky of the trails, or of the trails that range across the long, dark terraces. Here that held a harvest that lasted all 4 seasons, and in each season the juice of our life dry out and embed away. Yet, as I look at the names carved on the surface of the shore, obliquely cut columns, I tell myself that there were places where the devastation was the greater. The terraces with grape wines on the hills around Trieste have been replaced by the vineyards of death. So for the terraces on our hillside were still the same vineyards of death, and the harvesting in them did not stop. Stretcher bearers continued to haul their product down to the lowest terrace, and from there to smoke rose and spread above the third barracks roof. So you have to know that these terraces, when it was in the he was looking actually the symbolical let's say comparative between the terraces of his own picture when he was before captured, and then when he was in the concentration camp, that was terrace, let's say in positioned in terraces, and then when he came back, so it was three-dimensional. The symbolism and testimony of wine is particularly evident during the visit of Thomas. Thomas was one of I will stay here, but it's not. Thomas is a camp inmate who, like Pahor, was for Primorska region and whom Pahor describes as a unique Dionysian figure. So, but I think that I have this. Yes. Okay. Never mind, I apologize again. I'm very, very clumsy with PowerPoints. But like I said, the symbolism and testimony of white is particularly evident during visit this by Tomasz, a camp inmate who, like Pahor, was from Primorska region, and Pahor describes a unique Dionysian figure. His playfulness never left him. He guarded it, tended it, and surrounded me with. He told me about the bridges he and his sons blew up to stop an advancing Germany column, and his bright eyes held me captive, the eyes of the visionary who wanted me to be invisible too, so I could receive from him the Istrian red wine he planned to bring me to my house in Trieste, aberrant. No. It's too easy to say that Tomasz was trying to cheat death with his high spirits and tricks, transporting himself to Istria, where he drew healing nourishment from the ground. When describing the various ways of obtaining some extra bread in camp, he overcame the survivor's guilt for harvesting and privileged access to bread as a medic and stealing from it from the sick and dead. So here is actually some connection with the first communion that I began to speak at the beginning of this lecture. So, because I have only 2 minutes, no, yeah, okay. I will.
No more.
Yeah, no, I will maybe just very summarize it. So the point is that they did not receive bread like in the faithful of communion, let's say, that remind us for the Christ's blessing of bread and wine and the Last Supper, and the church's rituals that was formed on this basis. So Pahor's description of exchanging bread and cigarettes evoked Judas' betrayal in him. So he felt like Judas because he exchanged the bread for the cigarettes. So this is actually a nice paragraph But however, I will also just like to conclude this, that Pahor was an interpreter, was an ambulance man into the concentration camp, and was not only an occasional translator of the different languages spoken between the camp, but also the terrible, untranslatable language of the camp itself. So like a zone of annihilation of all that what is inhuman. As an ambulance man, Pahor is not addressed by the question, what are poets for, but rather the question, what is man for? Or, as Primo Levi puts in, if this is a man. The language of the camp closes the mouth of the narrator and leaves it open to the witness. In Pahor's testimonial narrative, the Eucharistic symbolism and the mystery of the consecration of bread and wine seems to be withdrawn. Instead, the diabolic and the banality of evil come to the fore. However, this withdrawal makes the moment of consecration stand out even more. We feel this especially when Pahor tells the story of Ivan, Giovanni, a boy who was completely physically and mentally disabled, and who, as if by some miracle, was sent a package from Biskupstv from Slovenia. So here I will not read it the whole, but you see in this paragraph, this little boy got somehow this package of biscuits, and he was looking as a holy gift from their parents. And the tragedy of this situation is that the mass at this moment crossed over him, and he died he actually was put at the floor, and the mass go over him. And as Pahor said then at the last, he said it was very tragic that this happens actually in this situation, that he stroked the sharpless ham, protected with his hands, and now, however, he lie on the floor alone. So when Pahor revisits at the end the crime scene for a few years later, he finds himself somehow persecuted as a witness, and his testimony becomes, let's say, some kind of testament. I will close now because I'm over the time. Thank you.